What does an overgrown orchid, a kettle filled with boiling water, and a wobbly piece of ceramic filled with holes have in common? Well, you might just be surprised. Welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. And you're wondering why I'm pouring boiling water straight on top of my orchid. Well, I was clever enough to decant it here first, and hopefully you can see the mist rising to give the illusion. What I really wanted to show you was not pouring the boiling water onto the orchid itself, but rather getting tepid or lukewarm water to soak this orchid in to help release those roots. We've got a video that we'll post in down below as how we release overgrown orchids from pots. Perhaps that will be helpful to you too. But yeah, we're just using this sort of lukewarm water just to help release those roots faster. Also, you can dunk this into your boiling water to help soak it first. It will also help sterilize it and remove any powdery residues or stuff that may be left on during the ceramic process, and sanitize it. So as you may have guessed, we're going to be showing you how we mount certain orchids. This one is a Cattleya, and it's well overgrown its pot now. As you can see, it's run down the side, becoming difficult to keep in the position that it was. So what I want to do is I want to put it onto a mount so that I can hang it up. Cattleyas are particularly good for this type of display as they don't like to be wet for too long. But it does mean we are going to have to water it frequently, but there is a way we can get around that too. So in this video, I'll be showing you how we mount this specific Cattleya using one of these mounts, and we're going to be using this mount here, mounting these two orchids onto it. This is a bifoliate Cattleya. This is Cattleya intermedia or Lata Rio, and this is Dendrobium farmeri. And how are these going to mingle? We'll get into that later. Let's do this Cattleya first, and then we can get to the fancy stuff. We have left this now to soak for around 20 minutes. You can leave it up to about an hour if you want to, just to make sure that those roots are nice and supple, because as we see, these roots are quite extensive already, and if we're trying to get them to lay onto this, we want them to be as flexible as possible so they don't break, because we know these roots can be pretty brittle when they dry. So as always, our good sanitized equipment, and we'll just be looking to see which piece we really want to put on. Okay, I'll take off this one side set here. So I'm looking for at least 4 or 5 of these back pseudobulbs for this to really take off, especially with mounting. Putting it into a pot and something, you can go with as few as 3, 2 even if you want to, but then you know you're going to have a long delay in flowering. So I'm going to be looking for at least 5 of these pseudobulbs that I want to take out to put on this to give it enough energy to keep growing and to push out those flowers immediately without any break or waiting for it to produce new growths and allow them to mature. Here we're going to be putting some mature growths straight on. Let's just come in and have a look. There we can see the growths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th one still has a leaf. The one behind it doesn't. So what I can do is just go in right at the base of this pseudobulb and cut in there. So I'm going to cut that off over there and then have this long piece. It is going to be stuck to the pot a bit, but once I've taken the cut, it's going to be easier to maneuver to take off. And with those more flexible roots now from being soaking in the water, we shouldn't have too much problem. There we go. And gently, we're going to release this from the pot. Also remembering, don't go putting boiling water on your plants. I did only use lukewarm water, something that you can put your fingers into without feeling any real heat, because we don't want to actually damage the cells. All we're trying to do is help make them a little bit more supple. So if it's going to burn your hands, believe me, it's going to damage the roots. And yeah, all we're trying to do is just unentangle these roots. And this is particularly where the warm water makes a big difference, making those roots a lot more flexible than they would otherwise be. So you're managing to do this quite relatively easily without cracking or breaking the roots. And there we go. All we're going to do is clean up some of the ends of these roots that are already dead, just to neaten it off immediately. And here we can see where these roots are starting to branch out themselves, and there's some older sections at the end of it. What we're going to do is just snip that right off there, just underneath where the branching is going to happen. That will allow these new root branches to really take off well, and they'll take over from any excess that you've cut off. And also with the soaking, all these old sheaths have become really easy to remove, but when mounting, it's really not necessary to remove them. It's often when potting them into pots that I'll do it, because then that will help reduce the risk of rotting, which on a mount is not going to be so troublesome. It's going to allow it to dry a lot faster. I'll just leave them on at the moment just to leave some protection. And then basically all we're going to be doing is mounting the plant like that. But what I want to do, because it's a relatively thin mount and it's a breathable mount, what I'm going to be doing is using some sphagnum moss just to hold that little bit of extra moisture around the roots, so that it can allow the plant to have extra moisture available during those drier periods when I may not be watering it quite that frequently. Here we have already nice, well hydrated sphagnum moss, just squeezing out some of that extra moisture. And basically I'm just putting a handful, just a small pad in the center, and then we'll be placing the orchid across the top of that. Just spreading the roots out across either side of it, so I can get the rhizome as close to the mount as possible, but without damaging the roots. And then you can use anything from zip ties to cable twists or little pieces of Scooby wire, just to attach the rhizome down onto the mount itself. Also, if you want to, you can use fishing line and weave it through and around. But for me, that's quite difficult to manage when you're trying to hold your plant like this. So we'll just get one of our little pieces of wire and stretch it through, and then just thread it through the base, through some of those holes that are available. So what I'm trying to do first for the initial tie is get one of those centerpieces that's going to help maintain the orchid stability while I tie the rest of it down. So we've just threaded it through two of the holes, taking our wire together, and then just twisting it together to ensure that it tightens itself up. And then that will slowly pull the rhizome down onto the pad of sphagnum moss. Now we'll just go in again. Finding another one of those magic holes. And then we'll just do one more at the front edge over here just to hold that down. And there we can see it's pretty stable already just with 3 ties. So it's actually relatively easy to do, especially if you're spreading the roots across over your pad of sphagnum moss. They'll help hold that sphagnum moss in place. If you don't have too many roots available, then you may just have to find another way of keeping that sphagnum moss together and then mounting the orchid on top of it. And when mounting your orchid on a plaque like this, whether it's a ceramic one or a wooden one, always look at the aspect that your orchid is facing. So we can see this one having been growing down the side of the pot, the aspect is actually that way. So you don't want to be hanging your mount this way. You want to make sure that the aspect is right and the leaves are facing upwards. So that's going to cause it less trauma. The leaves are the right way up for photosynthesis. So you can either mount it that way or that way, and all these leaves will do is just turn back slightly. We already have 1 or 2 facing in the right direction. But I think I'll probably mount this hanging vertically like that. And the best time to mount orchids is when you're seeing all this beautiful new growth, whether it's the new roots or the new shoots coming or both of them together. That's when you know it's time to get in and make sure you're doing the work that needs to be done on your orchids so that they can settle in quickly into the new environment that you're putting them. Now that we have done this layer, let's get on to these other ones. It's going to be a slightly different method for different reasons. And I'll also explain to you why it's such a good idea to make sure your mount and your orchid have all been pre-soaked, as well as your sphagnum moss. So before we get to that, we'll just make sure that our mount again is well moistened. That warm water gets absorbed up so quickly, it's wonderful. So we have this beautiful ceramic mount that we want to put these 2 orchids onto. And as I said, it's the bifoliate Cattleya intermedia that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be adding this Dendrobium farmeri onto it as well. And with mounting it, both of these 2 orchids do like that extra moisture. So what I've managed to do is get a nice curved mount, which gives me the space in the back. And all I've done here is I've woven this plastic mesh onto the back of it to allow me space that I can put in media that's not going to fall away. We've got a video regarding this as well that we'll link to the bottom, that we show you different ways that we use this plastic mesh and how we weave it together. Again, with this, we're going to be taking our pre-moistened sphagnum moss. Just give it a good squeeze so that it's not completely soaked. And then we'll very loosely pack this into the base of this. I'm not compacting it down at all. I still want to keep all those good air gaps in between it, but I just want to make sure it's filled up nicely. Okay, there we go, nice and filled, no huge big gaps anywhere, but still loosely packed enough that the air movement can happen through and around it. And with this backing, this sphagnum moss is not going to just fall out anywhere. So now that's ready. Our orchid's been nicely moistened and it will remove from the pot easily. See how nice this root growth is, just perfect, the right timing. There's a new shoot coming out. So the ideal time for this. So what I'm going to do, I was going to take off this section here because it's bigger. But I think what I'm actually going to use is I'm going to use this section here with the new shoot. So again here, especially with these pseudobulbs being so small and thin, I want to make sure I can get as many of them onto this mount as possible. So I'll actually be cutting it back all the way to there so that I have those 3 mature ones and the 1 new growth. Okay, this is going to make it a little bit more difficult. I'm going to have to remove the entire plant from the pot because I'm taking some of those mature bulbs that were rooted well into the pot itself. So let's just remove the whole orchid. Loosen up that media and then separate this piece out. And again here with that sanitized equipment again, we're just going to cut off some of those old roots at the back. But I do want to keep on as much root volume as possible, especially because I'm mounting. So there we have our little piece, and what we'll be doing is we'll be mounting the Cattleya to the top portion and doing the dendrobium to the bottom portion. The dendrobium is going to have more of a cascading habit, so I don't want it to cover up over the top of the Cattleya. Why am I mixing Cattleya and dendrobiums together? Don't they have slightly different needs and habits? In general they do, but these two have actually pretty similar requirements. They both have the same sort of temperature requirements, and both of them require almost a constant moisture supply. They don't want to be wet and they don't want to be dry. That's also one of the reasons that I'm putting such a big pad of sphagnum moss at the back of this, because hanging up it's going to dry out really, really quickly, as all mounts do, and I don't want to have to be watering this every day or twice a day. So this is going to allow me some leeway in my watering. The Dendrobium farmeri, although it does take a winter rest, it's a very short dry winter rest compared to the rest of the dendrobiums, and still then it doesn't want to be completely dry. And this Cattleya intermedia also has a very similar sort of dry requirement during winter, especially if the temperatures start to dip. It doesn't want to stay that moist. It doesn't want to stay that wet, but it still wants to be moist. And the size of those pseudobulbs almost tells you exactly that. Both of them have got relatively small pseudobulbs that aren't going to hold terribly much moisture for extended periods. So you can already tell that they're needing water more regularly than what some of the other Cattleyas and dendrobiums require. So I'm just judging which angle I need to put this on at. If I put it this way, which is going to be easier to tie on, it's actually not going to make too much sense, because now the Cattleya itself is starting to grow away from the mount, and I want to keep it growing towards the mount, and all those new roots are just going to be sticking out directly into the air, although they will turn back towards the mount. If I plant it this way, already they're up against the mount and they can root straight on. So we're just going to have to be a little bit more careful and tie it on that way, which is going to be more appropriate for the plant itself. If we can just thread a little zip tie through there. I probably should have thought of this earlier and done it before I filled this up, then it would have been easier to catch it through. But as they say, necessity is the father of invention. It's making a little hook makes it easy. Now, if I was wearing my glasses, this would probably be easier, and if I wasn't so fat-fingered. There we go. 1 or 2 little clicks of zip tie, and look, done already. So easy. And with these fresh roots growing like this, we can see the one's already aimed itself into one of those holes, into that sphagnum moss. This is going to root on so quickly, it's not even going to think about falling off. And with this Dendrobium farmeri, I showed you already what happens when you start messing too much with the roots. The pseudobulbs just tend to start dying off. So we're lucky that we've got a few little kikis here that came off pseudobulbs that have already died off at the base. So all I'm going to be doing is cutting those off, but again, not too close to the base. I'm going to leave that small little stump there. If you're asking me why am I doing it this way, we'll drop a link to that video where I explained everything to you there as well. And we have these 2 little kikis, and we're going to add those on to that mount. And now the nice thing about kikis like this is you can actually push them straight into the hole in the mount itself to get those roots almost touching it. And then you can tie it on from there. Let's just make sure they're supple enough to get in without breaking them. So I'll go for tea, let them soak for 20 minutes, and I'll be back with one slightly tidier tabletop later. Okay, these should be ready by now. Okay, just seeing which angle is going to be the best to put it on. I'm not going to put it this way because, again, it's going to be pushing those roots away from the mount. So I'm going to be mounting it that way onto it and trying to get those roots into that sphagnum moss. It looks like it's going to be just perfect. You might have to move the moss out the way slightly so we can ensure that it gets in tighter without breaking the roots. There we go. And now we've got to figure out how to do this with one hand. And this way we're going to see the tie on the outside. But as soon as this orchid manages to root itself in properly, we can then just go in and untwist the tie and pull it out. So there's the one. We've managed to get both sets of roots from the two kikis into these two holes here. So that was just well placed enough. So we had two little kikis on this one pseudobulb, and those should grow in just perfectly now. And we'll just add this other one to the other side. And there we go. One of the reasons, or should I say the main reason, why we're making sure that our mounts and our roots and the sphagnum moss are all moist is because when we've done repotting like this, we don't immediately water afterwards. We allow several weeks, sometimes even, before we feed or give it any water. This is just to allow the orchid a chance to actually go into recovery mode and start pushing out new roots and everything without it feeling like everything's okay and it's just going to just carry on the way it was. We need to put it into that rescue mode to really set it off to make sure that those roots can really grow quickly. And there's our two orchid mounts without any real hassle or stress. So please don't be scared of mounting orchids. This is the way they grow naturally out on the trees with their roots out and exposed. And all you're doing now is mimicking that environment. Obviously, if you are in lower humidity levels, you are going to be needing to water these more frequently, especially if you get those higher temperatures, because they will dry out relatively quickly. And most of these orchids do actually prefer to be on the drier side than the constantly wet, soggy side. So that's one of the reasons that they're going to do better on mounts generally. The reasons I like mounted orchids so much is because you can move them to the areas that are going to suit the orchid the best so easily. If they need more light, or if they need more air movement, or whatever it is, it's just so easy to move them and just hook them up where you want them. And the biggest reason that I like mounted orchids, excuse the pun, but is once they're mounted, you never have to repot them again. You can just let them grow and grow and grow, and they'll provide their own little climate and habitat for them just to keep growing. So it's going to save you a lot of time and effort in the long run. And Ed's got a lot of information down in that Buy Me a Coffee link. So if you've got any questions or queries, have a look down there first. I'm sure there'll be something that, if it doesn't answer your question, it will pique your interest about something else. And thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.